Bit of a hot topic going on right now. Can we consider a DLC Game of the Year? I think it's pretty interesting. So if you don't know, the nominees for Game of the Year in 2024 are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor Refantasia. Is that how it's pronounced? Refantasio? Refantasio? These are some good games, but I think it's pretty funny. Astrobot, definitely wasn't really expecting it. Balatro, out of left field. It's an incredible indie game. Didn't really think it'd be up here next to, Black Myth Wukong or Metaphor Refantasia. This is gonna happen the whole time, every time I say it now. But the thing that's standing out for a lot of people right now is Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree. This game didn't come out in 2024, the DLC did. So why is it on this list? Well, now they're considering DLCs can be part of the Game of the Year nominees. There's been a lot of debate over the topic though. How is a DLC gonna bring a game back to life in 2024? How is that gonna nominate it for the Game of the Year? I think it comes down to this year being a relatively dry year for gaming. We didn't really have any heavy hitters coming out, no games that people all looked at and said, this is it. Elden Ring really stood out though. A lot of people played it and they were pretty much like, if this came out when the game came out, this would be Game of the Year. Elden Ring already won Game of the Year, if you didn't know that, because the game is fantastic. If you haven't played it, what are you doing? Fantastic game, fantastic DLC. I think it's really funny that the DLC was so good, so expansive, it's just so incredible all around. It is competing with the likes of full release titles in the same year it comes out. This is, if you didn't know, this is a DLC that can run you back 40 plus hours. It is the full length of a game, right? Elden Ring on its own can run you back 100 plus hours pretty easily on your first playthrough. The DLC is going to run you back another extra 40 plus hours, depending on how in-depth you're going to get with it.
But ToneMeisterFlex, a DLC can't win Game of the Year, it's a DLC.
To that I say, fuck you. Maybe we gotta get some better games coming out, because obviously, if a DLC is even up for nomination, that means we had a pretty bad year coming up then, if a DLC is a nominee for Game of the Year. This might be a testament to just how good Elden Ring is as a game, or how good the DLC on its own just is.
But it's a DLC, it's not the full game. The game came out 2 years ago. It can't win 2024.
That's what the vote's for. If people don't want it to win, then vote for something else. What are you gonna vote for? You gonna vote for Astrobot? Full disclaimer, I haven't actually played any of the other games on this list, so now seeing that I've only actually played Shadow of the Erd Tree and I have watched countless hours of Balatro, I can tell you those are two fantastic games. Balatro was definitely a surprise to see even as a nominee to begin with. I didn't really think it would be here, but I think it's just this year has not really seen a lot of good games or a lot of industry turning games, the kind of game where everyone universally goes, this is really good, we should all play this. This is the game that we all play this year. The one thing on this list that I know everybody has talked about, was everywhere online, you couldn't get away from it, was Elden Ring's DLC. This year it was all about Shadow of the Erd Tree. That came out, it pushed everyone online to talk about it. To be fair, I also saw that with Astrobot. Astrobot was such a surprise hit from Sony, and everyone kind of unanimously went, wow, this is surprisingly good. Had a lot of heads turning, a lot of people talking about it.
But Astrobot's only on the PlayStation 5. Hello Cynical says that has no games. It can't win, it must be bad.
I haven't actually heard that argument. I just think it's funny to do that, boys. But I do think it's interesting to actually look at these titles, because I haven't personally, like I said, I haven't personally played a handful of these, but I have watched some gameplay on each of them. But I will say, just from generally being online within the gaming spheres, Black Myth Wukong I think I heard about for about a week. it disappeared. A lot of what I was hearing was people saying the game was way too short. It wasn't exactly worth the money for how much was actually in the game, but it was generally a good experience. Metaphor Refantasio? Refantasio? I haven't really heard anything of. All I've heard is the music is really good. And that's kind of it. And then people were complaining, I think, about not being able to romance characters or something. That's about as chronically online as people are going to get. I honestly haven't heard anything about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I mean, for a little bit I did. It's like, oh, look, the big scenes. But no one really talked about, like, oh, this game's so good. It's just like it released and people played it. Balatro, I've really only seen in more like random communities. Like, I watched this guy Frost Prime a lot. He played Balatro for a bit, and people in his sphere played it, and that's, I think, where it kind of popularized, were from random streamers just kind of picking up the game, making videos on it, and making content around it. And then suddenly everyone else goes, hey, that's really cool.
Wow, card game's really fun. Wow, I really like gambling.
But that's kind of how I've seen it. I mean, like I said, Shadow of the Erdtree, I feel like took the internet by storm for a while. I mean, when Elden Ring came out, everyone was talking about it. That was a hit. That was 100% Game of the Year material when it came out, just simply because it was all the buzz. Everyone was playing it. Everyone was talking about it. It basically became like a big cultural thing in gaming. I mean, From Software with their Souls games, me being a massive simp for those games, I'll be honest, I've seen the evolution of the games and how they're impacting gaming as a whole, and now Elden Ring was kind of the biggest mainstream hit for From Software, and I think it's really interesting a DLC is even being nominated in the first place. I mean, there is merit to saying a DLC should not be nominated for Game of the Year. I get it, but I think maybe they're trying to recontextualize what a Game of the Year means.
What do you mean? Game of the Year means game that came out that year.
I'm starting to think what it might mean is they're trying to say Game of the Year is a game that was very heavily talked about within a particular year, maybe. I don't know. I'm spitballing ideas. I'm playing on Team DLC right now, okay? I'm trying to rationalize why it would be nominated in the first place. I don't know, it's definitely a massive surprise. Would I vote for Shadow of the Erdtree? Oh yeah, because I love it. I think that on its own is basically a whole video game. It's incredible. But I think that if we recontextualize what a Game of the Year is into saying maybe more so a game that generated a lot of buzz surrounding something particular in it, we might start seeing some pretty interesting things tossed in. Like, for instance, let's say it's a dry year in gaming. All of a sudden, Final Fantasy XIV Online says, here's this new massive expansion, and then it's Game of the Year material, because everyone's talking about it for the rest of the year, essentially.
But that game came out forever ago. It can't.
I'm just throwing ideas at the wall. I'm scrolling through a lot of comments on different sites. It's kind of been a general sentiment of just DLC getting a Game of the Year nomination doesn't really sit right with me. It's that I understand. It's definitely very strange to have a DLC running for Game of the Year, a game that came out 1, 2+ years ago, and all of a sudden the DLC comes out, big expansion. It's like, hey, this Game of the Year material. You know, an obvious sort of workaround on this, a solution as you could, is to have a different award. Best DLC of the year, best expansion of the year, best support of the year, something stupid. I don't know, something along those lines. Oh, what's the best expansion of the year? And it has just whatever big DLCs dropped throughout the years, right? I think that would pretty easily solve this whole debate. Just say, hey, DLC can't win Game of the Year, but it can get something like DLC of the year, expansion of the year, whatever it might be. Man, there were no good games that come out this year. Or rather, there were a lot of very forgettable games this year. Forgettable games, remasters, and remakes was pretty much this entire year. We had Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Remaster, Persona 3 Reload, a remake of Persona 3. The Last of Us Part 2 remastered. Multiverses re-released. I don't know what happened with that game. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I didn't even know that came out. The games that came out this year were just confusing, I feel like. It's a lot of games that had a ton of potential people were excited for, like Dragon's Dogma 2, that come out in a total messy state that no one likes it anymore, just because the game doesn't feel good to play. There were games that came out that were actually pretty decent, you know? Shadow and Sonic Generations or whatever? I don't know if that's a standalone game or not, but I know people were excited for that. Black Ops 6, I mean, people enjoy it. New COD game. New Mario Party. You know, then there was stuff like Star Wars Outlaws. Ew. And we had Warhammer. That's not a contender. People were really excited for that. Seems like it didn't do nearly as well as people expected. Concord came out this year. Big shout out to Concord, huh? Discontinued within what? A week of it coming out? 2 weeks? Game's already dead now. They just completely gutted the studio, I believe. Think we had Pal World this year? That was a game. We got Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Good game. I think that's another one that didn't live up to expectation though. Another Crab's Treasure was this year. That was a pretty solid game. I enjoyed that. I think that kind of generally this year was a little disappointing from a AAA standpoint. AAA gaming has been kind of taking a little bit of a nosedive. Every now and then you get something really good that comes out of nowhere. This year was kind of just flop after flop. I don't know. And that really just made Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree shine that much more in a year of just disappointments and dog water. And it's quite sad, because I know there was a lot of games this year people were genuinely excited for that could have turned into just something incredible. It could have been the next big thing for the year, and they just didn't really reach that point. You know, there was no big community surrounding a lot of this, spreading it all over the internet. And of course, one of the games that did get all over the place, lots of popularity, lots of traction, was Shadow of the Erdtree. Elden Ring's DLC was doing numbers this year. But I think it's pretty funny. This year we have a DLC that is one of the bigger nominees too. It's one of the ones that are probably gonna do very well in the nominations compared to these other titles, because I think it gained more traction for the year, has a larger audience due to just being a DLC. It already has a pre-built-in audience for it, and just being a fantastic quality expansion that is basically like playing another game. Does that mean it should be a nominee? That's up to you to decide, man. I don't know. A lot of people are going to tell you no, shouldn't be a nominee. It's a DLC. The game didn't come out this year. The DLC did. What do I think, though? If we are recontextualizing what it means to be Game of the Year, and have that include DLCs or expansions that kind of overhaul the game, or really improve the game, or add just a substantial amount of content to the game that gets buzz just generally all over the internet, sure. But if Game of the Year were to mean best game that came out this year, I don't think DLCs should be put up for nomination. It doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say this is the best game of the year and it was a DLC. No, that's best DLC of the year. But I don't know. I'm just some idiot on the internet. So, like, form your own conclusions. If you don't want it to win, don't vote for it. If you do want it to win, vote for it. If you think it's funny, vote for it. If you just really enjoyed the DLC like I did, vote for it. It's there. It's a nomination. It doesn't matter. It's the people's vote. If people want to vote for it, they're going to vote for it. If they're not going to vote for it, then they don't want to vote for it. Do what you want, man. I don't care. It's funny. People are upset over something so stupid. I'm gonna go play more Elden Ring. The Convergence, though. Best mod of the year. Got him. It's not even full released yet, but...